In light of the recent release of Mario Party Jamboree on the Nintendo Switch 2, I thought it would be fun to assess the $80 game debacle and see where we think it's going from here. Now, as it stands, the first-party Nintendo Switch 2 games that have been released so far are Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, the two Legend of Zelda titles, and most recently, Mario Party Jamboree. Of course, I'm talking about actual physical releases and not small releases like Welcome Tour. Coming up, we also have Kirby and the Forgotten Land, as well as Pokemon Legends ZA. These are games that we obviously know the prices to. We still have Kirby Air Riders and Metroid Prime 4, but we don't have the price or release date for those yet. But in the case of the ones that have come out, and the ones that we know are coming out, we know that Mario Kart World, Tears of the Kingdom, Mario Party, and Kirby are going to be $80. That's Kirby in the Forgotten Land Switch 2 edition, not Kirby Air Riders, obviously. And then we have Bonanza, Breath of the Wild, and Pokemon Legends at $70, which means 4 out of the major 7 first-party releases of the Nintendo Switch 2 are priced at $80. Now, of course, the most important thing here is that we're only focusing on first-party titles because everybody knows the Nintendo Switch 2 is not really a third-party machine. And obviously, in this list, I am including all of the Switch 2 edition games because those are Switch 2 titles. You can't play the new exclusive content in Mario Party Jamboree unless you buy the Switch 2 edition version. And I'll get back to Mario Party very shortly. And likewise with the Zelda games and Kirby. And I think it's important to highlight that because a lot of people like to pretend that the Nintendo Switch 2 is only charging $80 for a single game and it's Mario Kart World, but that's just entirely not true. And if the argument here is that the Switch 1 games are being purchased plus you're paying to upgrade it, so that's why the price is as high as it is, at that point this whole discussion can go into the fact that the Switch 1 games are priced as high as they are, and you don't want to go on that route, because that's perhaps even more absurd than the $80 price tag itself. Now, Mario Party Jamboree plus Jamboree TV being Nintendo's newest $80 title hasn't really gotten the benefit from the fandom as the other Switch 2 upgrades. So like in the case of the Zelda games, people got an app for it and they felt the app was worth $10. At least I think that's what their most recent argument in support of it is. That seems to shift with time. But in the case of Mario Party, well, you know, the Switch 2's been out for a while now. You've had Donkey Kong, you've had Mario Kart, you've enjoyed a few different games. So now fans and critics can go back to doing what they normally do, it's complain about Nintendo while still giving them money. And I think the Jamboree reviews are some of the funniest things I've read so far. Now, mind you, I am a Mario Party aficionado. That's basically the game that my friends and family and I play. You guys remember one of the things that I was most upset about for the Nintendo Switch 2 is the fact that they stopped true game sharing, where you would be able to both play the same game at the same time and it wasn't a loophole and Nintendo's own website would teach you how to do it. This was something completely available on the Switch 1. It's something that my friends and family and I all took advantage of, and we spent years playing Mario Party Superstars, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and Mario Party Jamboree, buying 2 copies of the game, so 4 of us can enjoy it at the same time. You might also remember that during the Nintendo Direct, a very sizable portion of it was dedicated towards Mario Party Jamboree. In fact, I think if you go based off of longevity, it might have had the most attention in the entire Direct. Or at the very least, it's definitely up there. One of the things I was very hyped about the Nintendo Switch 2 for, believe it or not, was for Jamboree TV. Because, again, that's very relevant to me and my friends. I was like, yo, this will be fun. I'll play with my family and friends. We'll have our faces on there. We can do chance time and see my brother rage. It's gonna be great. The point is, you would think that the Switch 2's main launch title was basically Jamboree, just based off of how much they were pushing it. And obviously, they were pushing it for the sake of game share. Now, game share is being called game share, but what it is a very bastardized version of the previous game share. It seems every single day there's a different person who's posting something online being like, hey, is this what the game share is? This kind of sucks. And everybody's like, well, what'd you expect? You wanted a free game. So most likely nobody is really enjoying this, except for like somebody that has 1 or 2 kids and they're like, hey, I'm having fun. But yeah, I think for the most part, this is just not a feature that's been enjoyed. Now, for something like Jamboree TV, that's very problematic, because that's supposed to be what's ultimately highlighting this feature. You know, game chat and game share and all this other stuff that people were just dying to see. From what I understand, on the main menu of Jamboree TV, you get Super Mario Jamboree, which is just literally the base game, Super Mario Jamboree. And then there's an additional setting that's Jamboree TV. That's with all the extra stuff with the mouse control minigames and the camera on the face and all that. And then you have the option to select game share, which is a whole separate mode, basically, and that's when you can share your game with people nearby that don't have a copy of the game. You can't do it online, even though that would probably make the most sense, but as I've covered in previous videos, anything that's strictly multiplayer focused is usually not available online, because Nintendo wants to make sure everybody's buying a copy of the game. And naturally, you're limited only to a single board and 30 minigames. So even with these limitations, even with the poor excuse of a display and a frame rate that you get during this version of GameShare because you're not actually downloading anything, they're still drastically watering down the experience because they don't want you to have more than, just a teensy bit of fun on this thing, out of fear that you might just get blown away and be like, well, I don't want to buy Jamboree anymore. This is good enough. So now effectively, 1/3 of what's available on the main menu of Mario Party Jamboree is basically a waste. If you're sitting next to somebody and you have to share locally with them in order for them to stream off of their account, you're much better just pulling off the Joy-Cons and playing together on the same screen. Now, outside of that, you have the base game, right? They can't really screw that up. That's just the base game, and Super Mario Jamboree was fairly loved by Nintendo fans and especially Mario Party fans. The problem here is that a lot of people were excited for Super Mario Party Jamboree to get, spruced up and look better, but it actually just got a regular Jamboree mode. It's not upgraded in any way. The resolution remains at 720p in handheld, 1080p docked. All of the fancy stuff that they had advertised, the new mini games and whatnot, everything is only accessible through Jamboree TV mode. So now you have this base game version that's making you think to yourself, well, if I was gonna play this, I might as well have just not spent the extra money on the Switch 2 edition. I would have just bought Mario Party Jamboree used off the secondhand market and crossed my fingers that Nintendo wouldn't brick my account and enjoy the game that way. It's an older game after all, and if they're not gonna give me anything special for the main game mode, which most people are buying Jamboree for the main game mode, then what would be the point in buying a Switch 2 edition? Well, that's when Super Mario Party Jamboree TV comes in. And here's the issue with Jamboree TV. It upgrades the visuals, but you don't get access to the Pro Rules or any other content from the base game like Koopa Run. So all of that fun stuff that made Jamboree even more fun because it had some unique new experiences that others were into, none of that was actually available in the Jamboree TV mode. So effectively, this whole $80 package is Jamboree TV. That's the only thing you're getting for paying $80, which is about as absurd as it sounds. And people have been enraged about this, and people should be enraged about this. But people should also expect this. In fact, I made various videos specifically about this, about how the $20 upgrade that you're going to be paying for Mario Party Jamboree is not going to be worth it because Nintendo is going to find a way to fumble it. Because this is the typical Nintendo experience. Everybody thought they'd be paying $20 and they were just going to be getting the entirety of Super Mario Jamboree in 4K. Or, at least up-resed a little bit, get the 1080p on handheld at least. Especially considering there are games across the Nintendo Switch 2 that got free updates, and that's part of the treat. You buy the new console, it's super expensive, and your games look better and work better. But no, Jamboree TV is the quintessential Nintendo upgrade. They treat their surprisingly very loyal fanbase in ways that range from indifference to outright contempt. But people keep lining up to dump cash into their pockets. Now, realistically speaking, the most loyal of Nintendo fans don't view this as an $80 title. In their minds, they're like, this is a $20 DLC that's not worth it, which basically for them means that their $60 game that they purchased is not getting an update on the Switch 2. And that's how they'll try to argue against it. They'll be like, this $20 DLC is not worth the upgrade. But at the same time, this is supposed to be a new console generation. There are waves of younger fans, there are waves of grandparents or parents who are going to the store to buy their children games. They look at the shelf, they see a game for $80 and it's Mario Party. They remember they played Mario Party when they were younger. As far as they are concerned, the only thing they see is Mario Party, $80, and it's a Switch 2 edition game. And unfortunately for them, they don't have the entirety of the 3 or 4 million people that actually love this console available at the helm to be like, yo, don't waste your money on this, just buy that $60 game, and actually don't even buy that $60 Switch 1 game, go find it used for cheaper. So yeah, I'm gonna treat Mario Party Jamboree plus Jamboree TV as what it is. It is an $80 first-party Nintendo title, and it is a very underwhelming $80 title. Now for Kirby and the Forgotten Land, who knows? It could be great, it could be bad. I will withhold any assumptions or guesses on that game because I haven't even played the base game yet. But considering the track record of the $80 titles, first you have Mario Kart World, a game that no doubt would have sold very well, but despite that, Nintendo felt the need to bundle it with the main console package that they were pushing out in order to sell people on the idea that this game is so big that people will buy an $80 game. Whereas in actuality, a vast majority of people got this game for $50 and they were forced to buy it digitally because if you bought it physically, you couldn't get it for $30 cheaper. So now Nintendo gets fewer people buying physical games, which is obviously what they always want. And they get to be like, yeah, our $80 title is doing exceptionally well. This is how good Mario Kart World is, that the price doesn't matter. And it also drastically inflates the numbers that realistically would have already been very high, but now they appear even higher with like an 80 to 90% attachment rate because they were bundled in with the console. And 1.5 months after launch, everybody that was praising Mario Kart World said they stopped playing it. I shouldn't say everybody, there's like 3 people out there who are still saying it's well and healthy, but I think everybody agrees that the discourse around Mario Kart World has drastically spiraled downwards, and all that remains is, you know, those 2 or 3 most passionate Nintendo fans who are still playing it, which is, you know, sometimes very normal, sometimes not, but generally speaking, for a game that is online, a game that is multiplayer, a game that's expected to carry the console with its online multiplayer is a pretty big drop-off. It's an $80 title, right? The variable pricing thing. We're supposed to be paying extra because we're gonna play this thing for a long time, and then Nintendo updates it and makes it worse. But I'll tell you a little secret, it would have dropped off anyway. Yeah, Mario Kart is good, but people get bored of it and then just always come back to it every few months. That's how it works. And then obviously the other $80 game was Zelda. People think that paying $10 for an app was good, but they don't consider the fact that if you wanted to play Tears of the Kingdom in 4K, whether or not you wanted the app, whether or not you wanted whatever additional stuff they had on there, you had to pay $80. It's an $80 price tag. Even if you paid $70 before, you still have to pay $10 now, which equals $80. So now you have 4 out of these 7 $80 titles that if you were to ask somebody if this game is worth $80, their reaction always ranges from eh to meh. But even despite that, I don't think that's the worst part of this all. The most disappointing thing here is that there are so many games that are coming out for the Switch 2 at $70 and they're realistically not worth that much. For example, Breath of the Wild is a game that came out, we're on what, over 8 years now? And it was effectively ported over to the Nintendo Switch 2 with a slight upres, plus of course the inclusion of the app. And now you have an old Zelda game as a launch title for the Nintendo Switch 2 priced at $70, and people are considering that reasonable because it's not $80. You have Donkey Kong Bonanza priced at $70. This game probably would have came out 3 years ago if Nintendo Switch 1 wasn't doing so well, but since they stretched out the lifespan of the Nintendo Switch because of the longevity it had post-COVID, and if it was priced at $70 back then, people would have lost their mind, but now they're like, oh, Nintendo's doing us a favor, they are not charging us $80 for Bonanza. And then also you have people being grateful because Pokemon Legends is gonna be a $70 game, and if they decide Metroid Prime 4 ends up being $70, they're also going to feel very grateful because Nintendo is not charging $80. Whereas again, if this whole $80 price tag wasn't being slapped onto so many Switch 2 games, specifically first-party games, everyone would be grumbling their way to the store. Everyone might actually be second-guessing their purchases before they buy them. And obviously, this sounds terrible, and it is terrible. We should not be very accepting of $70 titles, and primarily because of the amount of money these companies are already making off us now in comparison to what they were making before. Inflation has existed throughout my entire life, but games stagnated as much as they have because companies kept making more money. And guess what? They've made even more money, and they made a hell of a crap ton more money because of COVID days, but now they realize that people are dumb and will just spend money on anything. So they're like, forget it, let's just up the prices as much as we can. There is one glimmer of hope here, is that I genuinely believe the backlash towards the $80 price tag has gotten things done. The final verdict of voting for our wallets about whether or not it's going to affect the Switch 2 in the long term has yet to be seen. And it's going to take a few months until we know for sure if enough people have actually pushed against Nintendo on this backlash. But I think there are two very clear things that people have pushed back against, and one of them is stronger than the other. Those two things are the $80 price tag and game key cards. So I think the pushback against game key cards has been good, and I think it's been strong, and I think it has raised some eyebrows at Nintendo. The issue that I have with this idea that game key cards are the reason that third-party games aren't doing well is that, as I've made very clear in the past a bunch of times, I don't think that the third-party titles would be doing that well regardless. I think that Nintendo and maybe their shareholders genuinely thought that if they brought in the game key cards, it would mean that they would sell well because they're more affordable for the companies to make and people will be happy about it. I don't necessarily think that they're doing poor because they're game key cards. I think they're doing poor because they're third-party games on a Nintendo console. But yeah, I'm sure a percentage of that is because the data's not on the cartridge. However, as far as the $80 stuff is concerned, yeah, that's definitely a backlash thing. I actually think that Pokemon is being priced at $70, partially because of the backlash, but also in part because Pokemon Company gets to decide that. And maybe they're like, ooh, yeah, we're not gonna put that any higher. We're gonna keep it at $70 because we already see people raging about this and we've dealt with rage in the past and we're not gonna push our luck. What I am most intrigued to see is what Nintendo decides to price their upcoming Switch 2 Edition games as, that obviously being Metroid Prime 4. I'm expecting that they wanted to charge $70 for the Switch 1 version of that game, but if they did that, they would have to charge $80 for the Switch 2 version, and since there's been such a massive backlash against $80 games to the point that other publishers are putting their prices back down to $70 because they're like, okay, sorry about that. So I'm guessing Nintendo's gonna do the same thing, although you never know. These guys are crazy. And by these guys, I don't only mean Nintendo, I also mean the people that buy stuff from Nintendo sometimes. Regardless of whether or not Nintendo prices anything else at $80, I think it's very clear and very obvious that the industry knows about the backlash and the industry has the backlash in mind. And I have a very big feeling Nintendo's going to be pulling back on this. After Kirby and the Forgotten Land, I don't know that they'll want to try charging $80 anymore. It might depend on how well Kirby actually does. Or maybe they decide to go with Metroid Prime 4, that's a big hitter, it's a new game, we'll put that at $80 and see how well that does. But I'm certain that if nothing else gets priced at $80, Switch 2 Edition or regular, it's going to be clearly because of the uproar that we've put in, the drop the price talk. Because even people that have bought the Nintendo Switch 2 have said that they completely will not buy anything for $80. And since that has happened, nothing has been announced to be $80. We'll see if that sticks. But obviously, I am speculating here. I'm being a little bit hopeful. And I'm also kind of grumpy because $70 has just become kind of acceptable. But you guys might not like this. I kind of accepted the $70 already before the Switch 2 launched. I figured that's going to be the standard price. Not that I'm happy about it, but I just figured, you know, Tears of the Kingdom came out, other consoles are charging $70, that's gonna be acceptable. I just don't like that the industry had to do this whole dumb game where they flirt with $80 and then drop back down to 70, and now people are like, yay, we got 70. In any case, that's all I got for today. Did anybody here actually buy the Jamboree Switch 2 Edition? I don't mean the upgrade pack, I mean you went out of your way and you bought the Switch 2 Edition cartridge. Let me know if you think it was worth it or not. I'm curious. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I will catch you on the next one.